I have never been able to get used to the sound that a house makes when it realizes no one inside is breathing anymore. It is not a noise so much as it is an absence, an adjustment, as if the floorboards and vents and light fixtures reach a quiet agreement to carry the weight without complaint. That was my fourth thought at 3 in the morning. July 17th, 2004. Standing in the doorway of a yellow bungalow on Maple Ridge Drive with a cigarette I didn't light and a pen I didn't use. My first thought was that the old woman had put up a fight. My second was that it hadn't helped. My third was that we were too late for the 7th time in 4 weeks. I am Sergeant Mark Delaney. Back then, I worked Jefferson County Patrol, which meant on most nights I wrote up noise complaints and argued with raccoons on porches. On that night, my partner, Joel Whitaker, and I were first on scene to a place that smelled like a broken refrigerator and looked like a burglary that had forgotten to steal. The kitchen window was smashed in a pattern that no rock had ever made. The living room shelf overloaded with commemorative plates was tipped, but the plates were not shattered where they ought to have fallen. It was as if something had backed through the house. Confused by furniture, frustrated by gravity, we followed the red-brown trail up the stairs and into the master bedroom. The victim was a retired schoolteacher named Martha Collins, 74 years old, lived alone, kept the sort of house that still had doilies under lamps. Some menino. Something had ripped her body open and then wrapped what was left in torn bedding that had once been white. Feather stuffing clung to everything. The room had a snow globe stillness except for the flies that always know first. And there was one more thing. The detail that would keep me staring at the ceiling every night for a month. Bloody handprints. On the ceiling. Not smeared. Not accidental. Planted there by palms that had learned how to anchor themselves above our level of understanding. Jesus, Joel said softly, like the name might cause the prints to change their mind. Don't talk. I told him. Just look. We stood in that cold pre-dawn quiet until the coroner and the crime scene techs pushed in and the house coughed up its evidence to people better at parsing it than we were. We were told, as we'd been told 6 times before, that there were bite marks on the body that looked human until you tried to match them to any human mouth, that there were no usable fingerprints, and that whatever had done this had taken its time. Outside under a flickering streetlight, I smoked the cigarette I'd been carrying around. Lieutenant Dana Holloway walked over from her unmarked, face gray even under sodium vapor. You and Whitaker were first in? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Anything different? The prints on the ceiling, I said. Holloway flinched. Ceiling? Clear as day. She glanced toward the house, then back at me. We'll get samples. Anything else? Smell? I said. But that's the same as the others. I expected her to tell me to go home and sleep. Instead, she said, the sheriff wants this quiet. The paper is sniffing. I need you to keep your mouths closed. Understood? We understood. We just didn't control the wind. By noon, the Jefferson Herald was on every diner counter with a headline that made the coffee taste worse. Terror in Hartsfield. IS a cannibal on the loose? The article quoted anonymous sources who sounded a lot like us. It cited bite marks consistent with human dentition and suggested that we'd covered up 6 previous murders to avoid spooking the town. My name was not in the piece. Joel's wasn't either. But the feeling of being naked in a small place was there. All the same, Sheriff Carl Morton read the paper like it had insulted his family. You two will find whoever talked and fix it, he said, jabbing a thick finger at us in his office. We are in control. We look in control. I will not have federal boys thundering down here telling our people we are not in control. Sir, I said carefully, we are not in control. Morton leaned back in his chair, came forward again, leaned back once more. You're going to talk to folks. All of them. Men 16 and up. Door to door. Interviews. We make a list and we clear it. The directive was theater, relief by activity. It did not ask the one question that had been chasing me since dawn. What could put a handprint on a ceiling without a ladder? When you have a partner long enough, you learn how to tell when he is holding something back. Joel had that look on Sunday night when he didn't answer my calls. He showed up Monday morning with his badge and his service pistol in a plastic bag. He set them on Morton's desk and said nothing. The sheriff stared, thinking, then took the badge and the gun and placed them gently in a drawer. Go home, Morton said, and don't talk to anyone. Joel did not go home, or if he did not stay there. His phone rang hot and cold for 2 days. On the morning of the 3rd, with the Herald spreading our failures like peanut butter, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Sergeant Delaney? A woman's voice said. This is Elise Parker with the Daily Courier. I'm seeking comment on the series of killings in Hartsfield. I hung up and turned to find Morton blocking my path with fresh wrath. Another copy of the Herald was folded like a weapon in his hand. Fix it, he said again, but his voice had an extra edge now. Fear-edged, because fear learns fast. I did not fix it. I drove instead to a second-story walk-up on the north end of town where I knew I might find the one person who could still look me in the eye and tell me the truth. The rain came in big, pelting drops while I waited under the covered entry. I buzzed the bell twice, then pounded with my fist. Joel, I called. Open the door. I just want to talk. There was no answer. I turned to slog back to my car when the speaker crackled. Mark, came the whisper. Come up. Now. He met me at the door with eyes that belonged to someone who hadn't slept but had dreamed the whole time. He held a gun low and away from me, barrel pointed at the floor, hands shaking. It's me, I said quietly, palms open. Put the gun away. Joel. He set it on a side table instead, as if that made him safer. I talked to the paper. He said, I did it, and I don't regret it. I waited. I didn't tell them anything that would put someone else in danger. He said, I told them enough to make other people pay attention. They have to lock their doors. They have to look through the peephole. They have to know this isn't a bear. Morton wants your scalp. Morton wants to pretend this is a storm that will blow over if he stares at the sky long enough. He poured whiskey into a glass that had not been washed in a week, offered the bottle to me, then took my silence as refusal and poured himself another. There's something else, he said, something I found. What did you find? A story, he said, hating the word, because it made him sound like he was chasing a ghost. From a retired forest ranger who drinks at Fox Hollow on Fridays. Last year, he said, a group of 6 hikers went off trail in the Mount Pilchuck area. Only 2 came back, a man named Rowan Greeley and a woman named Elise Winslow. He looked at me to see if I recognized either name. I shook my head. Winslow told the ranger. Joel said that on the last night before they were found, Greeley followed the 5th hiker into the trees and came back alone 10 minutes later. Taller somehow, thinner somehow, with blood on his mouth. She thought she was hallucinating until she saw his face in daylight and could not unsee what she had seen. She moved away a week later, sold her house, changed her number, left Hartsfield for May Creek. Couldn't stand to live down the road from him anymore. Rowan Greeley lives here? I asked. North of town. Joel said. Family place. Beef cattle on 2 pastures and a long barn that looks like a church that gave up. Records show he inherited from his father. He has no record. He has receipts from the butcher for prime cuts. He is a generous donor to the county fair. He let the facts rest between us like a third person. You're asking me to believe, I said, that a man got lost in the woods and came back possessed. I'm asking you to believe that we know nothing about the limits of hunger. Joel said, and that the only witness who might talk about it is a woman who moved away because she didn't think anyone would believe her. We drove to May Creek at noon, because if we did not put our shoes on and go there, we would talk ourselves into circles and never leave. The rain had given up. The sky had that post-storm cleanliness that pretends nothing was ever dirty. We found a small house with a postage stamp lawn and a cherry-red tricycle lying on its side like it had fallen mid-giggle. A woman in her late 30s watched a toddler herd plastic dinosaurs on a rug under a bay window. When the bell rang, she stood and came to the door with her jaw set, prepared to say no to whatever we were selling. "Elise Winslow?" Joel asked. "Who is asking?" She said. "Joel Whitaker." He said, "This is Sergeant Mark Delaney. We're from Jefferson County. We're not here to arrest anyone. We need to ask you about Rowan Greeley." The name cracked her expression, just slightly. She glanced at the child behind her, then unlatched the door and opened it wider. "Come in," she said, "but you will not ask me to come with you. You will not say his name in front of my son." Her living room was tidy the way you learn to be tidy when you are the only adult in the house. Family photos were arranged with care that stole time from sleep. She sat in an armchair, and we took the couch like visiting cousins with bad news. "I have not seen Rowan since the day the Rangers walked us out," she said. "He called my cell 5 times a week for a month after we got home, then stopped. I changed my number. I sold my house in Hartsfield in 7 days. My mother thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. But if I see him again, I see the blood. I hear the way he said the words." "What words?" I asked. "I'm hungry." She didn't exaggerate the sound or dramatize the memory. She said it plainly, and it was worse because of that. "He was always a gentle man," she said. "Knew the names of every tree. Could coax a foal to stand on shaky legs. After we got lost, he stopped speaking. When he did speak, his voice sounded like rust, like he had swallowed gravel. He looked taller. He looked wrong. The last night before we were found, he followed Nick into the trees. 10 minutes later, he came back alone, skinny as a scarecrow and pale like he had emptied himself out and filled up with something else. The next day, the Rangers found us. Everyone told me I was dehydrated, that I was making stories out of lightning cracks. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Joel asked, though he knew the answer. "I did," she said. "I told an officer that something had changed him in the woods. He told me to drink Gatorade and rest. So I moved away. Sometimes you have to pick between being believed and being safe." She looked down the hallway toward a small bedroom where quiet suggested nap. I felt the nameless pull that children put on the truths we carry, tell enough to keep them alive, hide enough to let them sleep. "Ms. Winslow," I said, "we think Rowan may be connected to a series of killings in Hartsfield. 7 in 4 weeks. The bodies look like they were fed on." She closed her eyes. "I will not come with you," she said. "I will tell you this. If he is what I saw, he is not all gone. And if you kill him, whatever is inside him will look for a way back to the mouth it knows." "You think it is a thing," Joel said softly. "Not a sickness." "I think there are names for everything," she said, "and we do not know most of them." We left May Creek with the sun pretending to be brave. I persuaded Joel to stop at the station first. He waited in the car while I pushed through a lobby loud with rumors. Officer Barnett sat at a folding table with a spreadsheet printed so small she needed a ruler to track the rows. "Barnett," I said, "has Rowan Greeley been interviewed?" She flicked her eyes down the sheet and tapped the paper. 2 hours ago. 5 minutes. Cleared." "Cleared how?" "Asked if he knew the victim. He said no. Asked if he'd seen anything. He said no. Cleared." "Did anyone ask him about the mountain?" She looked up at me like I'd asked if anyone had quizzed him on the price of butter. "The what?" I left before my temper said something my badge would regret. Joel saw my face and didn't ask. I told him anyway as we rolled out onto North Avenue. They let him go. I said, "We're going to him now." Rowan's place sat back from the road behind a row of poplars that had grown comfortable, ignoring people. The house was one floor and one color of beige. The barn behind it was taller than it needed to be. The pastures on either side were dotted with black cattle that glanced at us the way cows do. Slow and skeptical, Rowan opened the door before we knocked, which told me he had been watching from a window. He was in his late 30s and wore a ball cap with a feed company logo and a polo shirt that had once been white. He had the tan of a man who thinks sunscreen is for people with office jobs. He smiled with calm courtesy that would have looked good on a Sunday school teacher. "Deputies?" he said, brows lifted in patient welcome. "Inspectors," Joel said smoothly, and I followed his lead because sometimes you take the truth and tilt it just enough to catch the light. "We're following up on a few questions that might have been missed earlier." "Come on in," Rowan said, stepping aside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. I had braced for the scent of a farmhouse in summer feed. Manure. Sweat. This was sweet sour. A rot you taste at the back of your tongue. The second thing was the kitchen island, a slab of granite veined like ice over a black stream, piled with cuts of red meat so fresh they pulsed. A butcher's blade lay next to the heap, handle worn smooth by a hand that liked to use it. "I'm sorry about the smell," Rowan said pleasantly. "I've had a mouse problem. They die in the walls. The dog finds some. I find a rest." "I had that once," I said, not looking at Joel, because if I did, we would both say what we were thinking. We took stools at the far edge of the island. When Rowan reached for the knife, I saw that his fingernails were a little too long and a little too clean, like he had been paying attention to the wrong details. "You went on a hiking trip last spring," I said after we exchanged enough small talk to pretend we were decent. 6 people. Only 2 came back." Rowan's jaw twitched. He set the knife down and scratched the back of his neck. "Terrible thing," he said. "We got lost. People wandered off. Panic does strange things to the mind." "What do you remember about the last night?" I asked. He exhaled through his nose and looked past us at a point on the wall. "Pain," he said. "It started in my head and then went down into my arms and legs, like I was being pulled forward by something inside my spine. Then it stopped, and I was so hungry I thought I would eat my hands." He laughed lightly, like the remark was a throwaway. It did not land like a joke. "Just animals," he said almost to himself. "At first, just animals." The kitchen lights seemed to dim and brighten with the words, which was ridiculous. I had my hand on the butt of my service weapon without remembering when I had put it there. "What do you mean?" Joel asked, his voice even. Rowan turned toward us slowly, and whatever he was pretending to be fell off him like a coat you forget is too thin. His eyes were darker than eyes are supposed to be. Not black. Exactly. Just deeper. Like looking down a well and seeing night at noon. His teeth showed when he smiled, and the canines were longer than any dentist would have allowed. "There are things older than us. Officers," he said, soft and unhurried. "We tell ourselves we are the most dangerous story. We are not. There is hunger, and there is the shape it takes when it gets tired of waiting." "What did it tell you?" Joel asked, because he had always been the brave one in the quietest ways. "It told me to eat," Rowan said. He did not raise his voice for that line. He did not need to. "It told me to stop pretending I could fill the hole with anything else." He moved then, too fast for a man already full of confession. I pushed backward and went sideways into a chair. Joel went the other way, drawing and firing with a speed I had only seen twice, and both times at paper targets. The first shot caught Rowan high in the shoulder, spinning him and dropping him to one knee. He made a noise I don't know how to write, like a hurricane being forced through the mouth of a bottle, then leaped. Not forward. Up. He hit the ceiling with his hands and feet and stuck there for a breath, like he was parsing his route, then scuttled like an insect down the hall overhead toward a door that had not been open when we entered. The smell doubled. The house made the sound I hate, the one it makes when it chooses how it will hold a new weight. We ran. The door to the basement was open. Cold air rolled up like it had been waiting. I will tell this part quickly, because I have learned that there are some details that help a jury and other details that ruin a person. The bulb halfway down the stairs was burned out, and the light switch at the top did not work. Joel put a beam on a spot near the floor, and the beam was swallowed like a cracker by a maw. There were bodies and parts of bodies, some large and still red, some small and gray. There were animal legs and human arms, and what I think were rib cages from both lined up in a workmanlike fashion along the cinder block wall. I might have counted if counting would have changed a single thing. Rowan stood near the far wall, taller than he had been upstairs. Chest stretched like his skin had forgotten how much space it was supposed to cover. He smiled at us like a host tries to put you at ease when you arrive too early for a party. "Forgive the mess," he said. "The refrigerator down here is broken." We shot him until the guns clicked dry and the noise had to find another room to live in. He did not fall the way men fall. He crumpled and folded, and then unspooled, and then lay very still in a posture that made me think of a spider that has given up pretending to be a leaf. When the sirens finally skidded up the drive, Lieutenant Holloway was pale to the lips. Sheriff Morton took 2 steps into the kitchen and turned around and held onto the counter with both hands like he had just gotten off a boat. The cleanup lasted 6 days. The Herald wrote 3 more stories. The federal boys came with their clipped hair and their non-committal questions and left with boxes that looked heavier than cardboard should be. The town did what towns do after something unforgivable. It made casseroles. It scratched names into wood. It learned how to sleep again. And it told itself a story that permitted the sleep. Joel came back to work 2 weeks later and did not bring a bottle with him. The sheriff retired quietly in the spring and went to Florida to fish. Lieutenant Holloway took a job in Seattle where the noises were different. As for me, I still live in Hartsfield. The house my wife picked has a big front porch and a maple in the yard that drops leaves the color of new pennies for a month every fall. I am careful with the light bulbs. I am careful with my son when he asks me what is the worst thing I have ever seen. I tell him the truth in pieces he can carry, and I put the rest back where it can't tip over. When he is older, if he still wants to know, I will take him up to the old highway turnout and point toward the line of trees. And I will teach him how to listen to the wind and tell the difference between a branch that breaks because it is weak and a branch that breaks because something is passing through. There are 3 kinds of violence I have learned to name. There is the violence of anger that arrives like a summer storm and goes as quickly. There is the violence of profit that wears a tie and writes in clean ledgers. And there is the violence of hunger, which is older than us and will outlast us if we do not keep it in its place. Some people carry all 3 like a song in a pocket. Others carry none and still pay the price. The cases from that summer were closed. The reports were signed and filed. The official narrative said what official narratives say when the truth refuses a neat frame. We did what we had to do. We did it as quickly as we could. We prevented harm. And we would do it again. The unofficial narrative is the one that wakes me at 3 a.m. Sometimes. The one that smells like a broken refrigerator and whispers like a man with gravel in his mouth. It says that hunger learns faces. And once it learns yours, it does not forget you. It says the handprint on the ceiling is not a trick. It says that there are things here with us that never learned our names because they never needed to. I have not been back to the basement. The bank took the property and put it up for auction, and someone bought it for the land and knocked the house down. A new house sits there now. Clean lines and fresh paint. A family with 2 bicycles and a golden retriever that likes to bring everybody the same stick. They cut the old poplars down because they leaned toward the road in storms. The new trees they planted are too young to do anything but try. I drive by without slowing. I do not want to count the windows. But sometimes, when the weather is about to change, my porch light flickers for a second before settling. It is a harmless thing. Electricity is a river, and rivers have eddies. It is nothing. I tell myself this every time. On the anniversary of the night we walked down the stairs, Joel and I meet for coffee at the diner off Route 9. We don't say much. We talk about traffic and Little League. We tip heavy and sit there long enough that the waitress asks if we want pie, and we say yes, because you take sweetness where you can find it. Before we leave, Joel puts a hand on my shoulder and squeezes once. An old signal from academy days that says I see you. I do the same back. We don't talk about Elise Winslow unless one of us reads her name in the obits of another place decades from now. We don't talk about the box the federal boys carried out of the basement that took 2 of them to lift. We don't talk about how, when Rowan hit the ceiling, his hands didn't slip. A year after everything, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a single sentence printed from a computer and cut out rough. It does not need the woods. I burned it in a coffee can behind the shed while my son chased the dog with a plastic sword, and my wife laughed at the way the dog limped on purpose to make the game fair. The smoke that rose from the can smelled like paper and glue. The breeze carried it west across the street and into the mouth of the maple. If you have read this far because you wanted a neat conclusion, I am sorry. We ended that man's part in it. That is the conclusion we are allowed. The rest is above our pay grade and outside our jurisdiction. The world is bigger than the map we use to tell ourselves where we are safe. The world contains the woods and the cities and the spaces underneath all our houses where we put the things we cannot look at every day. As for hunger, it is not a villain. It is a force. It is a river. It is a name written on the inside of every creature's mouth. We write other names over it: justice, mercy, community, and we are right to do so. But the old name does not erase itself. When we forget that, we leave our doors unlatched and our lights unscrewed, and the thing that knows our name smiles and steps over the threshold. Here is what I tell my son now. In a voice that does not shake, lock the door. Check the window. Feed the dog. Say goodnight like you mean it. And if you wake in the dark and you hear a man downstairs whose voice sounds like gravel, do not go to the stairs. Wake me. That is what I am for. I cannot tell you that will be enough. I can tell you that for most nights in most houses, it is. Comment below if you want. Tell me what you believe about violence and injustice, where it begins. What feeds it? Who pays when it ends? Tell me whether you think hunger is a disease to be treated, a crime to be punished, or a fate to be resisted, and how you came to your answer. Tell me if you think the system ever knows what it's doing, or if we are all pretending until the daylight lets us pretend better. I have my own answers, but I am old enough to know that the story gets truer when more voices tell it.